What happens if you take a roaring 20s prizefighter, drop him in a time machine, and pit him against a 21st century champion? Fans of the old school point to the sheer grit of historical legends. These guys were stepping into the ring up to 45 times a year, fighting through cracked ribs and broken hands just to put food on the table. On the other side, today's champions are backed by millions of dollars in sports science. They rely on periodized strength conditioning, tailored nutrition, and cryotherapy to build bodies engineered for peak output. So, does modern physiology automatically create a superior athlete? Or did the brutal, non-stop frequency of the past breed a tougher human? The truth is, raw athletic prowess wouldn't decide this fight at all. If you put these two men in a ring together, the winner is going to be determined entirely by which era's rulebook the referee enforces. To understand why, we have to look at how fighters prepare for the scale. In the early 20th century, weigh-ins happened on the exact same day as the fight. Boxers had to compete at their natural, everyday walking weight. Trying to game this system was a terrible idea. If a fighter dehydrated themselves just hours before stepping into the ring, they would suffer rapid muscle failure. Worse, they drained the cerebrospinal fluid protecting their brain, leaving them highly vulnerable to a knockout. That dynamic held until the 1980s, when television networks started losing millions of dollars on abruptly canceled title fights because someone missed weight. To protect their broadcasting schedules, promoters moved the weigh-in to the afternoon of the preceding day. This chart illustrates how that 24 to 36-hour window changed the sport. By tracking a modern fighter's body mass, we can see it plummeting by 10 to 15% in the 3 days before the official weigh-in through severe dehydration tactics. But notice what happens immediately after they step off the scale. The extended recovery time allows athletes to rapidly rehydrate and pack that mass right back on before the opening bell. Because of this, a modern welterweight might weigh 147 pounds on the scale, but they step into the ring closer to 165. If our historic legend fights a modern champion, he is effectively fighting a middleweight, creating a massive disadvantage in leverage, muscle mass, and striking power. The next major factor is what covers their hands. Early 20th century fighters used compact 4-ounce gloves packed tightly with natural horsehair. Horsehair is highly compressible. As a fight progresses and punches land, the hair shifts away from the knuckles, migrating back into the wrist compartment of the glove. This left a thin layer of leather directly over the raw bone. Throwing a maximum force punch at an opponent's solid skull carried a high risk of fracturing the metacarpals. To protect their hands, fighters had to be incredibly cautious. They threw scraping shots to cut the face, or they targeted the much softer tissue of the opponent's body. By the 1980s, the sport transitioned to 10 and 12-ounce gloves built with synthetic, injected molded foam. This schematic shows how that foam retains its shape and density over hundreds of strikes, which reduces the peak impact force on the puncher's hand by about 40%. This material buffer allows modern fighters to throw continuous, maximum force headshots without breaking their hands, and it also changes how they defend. By placing these physically bulky gloves against their temples, they create a thick, synthetic shield, known as the high guard, to absorb incoming damage. If you took that static, modern high guard back to 1920, it would fail instantly. Those smaller, harder horsehair gloves would slip right through the gaps in the defense, landing directly on the temples and eyes. A modern fighter relies on the physical mass of their equipment to block shots. A historic fighter couldn't afford to take those hits on their gloves. Instead, they had to rely on very precise head movement, parrying and slipping to survive in the ring. Then there is the issue of the clock. For most of the 20th century, championship bouts were scheduled for 15 rounds. That required an immense amount of energy conservation. Fighters had to pace themselves like marathon runners, relying on a deep aerobic base to ensure they had something left in the tank 45 minutes later. Inside the ring, Erling rules also permitted a significant amount of standing grappling. A fighter could tie up their opponent's arms, secure underhooks, and physically lean all their body weight onto the other man's shoulders to exhaust their leg muscles. That grueling war of attrition changed following a tragic event in 1982, when South Korean contender Kim Duk-koo passed away from brain trauma after a 14-round title fight. major boxing councils swiftly reduced the championship distance for safety. Bouts were capped at 12 rounds. Conveniently for the television networks, 36 minutes of fighting plus rest intervals fit perfectly into a clean, highly profitable 1-hour broadcast slot. Today, modern referees actively step right in to break up the clinches the very second a grapple starts. Without the ability to hold and rest, and with 3 fewer rounds to survive, 21st century fighters are conditioned to maintain an intense, explosive striking pace. To make it to the final bell in 1920, you had to be a master of stamina. Today, the sport rewards high-volume sprinters. So let's put our time-traveling fighters back into the ring and apply the modern rulebook. A day before weigh-in, foam-padded gloves, and a fast-paced 12 rounds. Under these conditions, the 21st century champion has a distinct advantage. Their massive rehydrated size, impenetrable high guard defense, and explosive combination heavy pacing would likely overwhelm the historic legend. But flip the scenario. The referee applies the classic rules: a same-day weigh-in, tiny horsehair gloves, and a grueling 15 rounds where inside grappling is completely legal. Now, the modern fighter is in serious trouble. Forced to fight while severely dehydrated, their muscles cramp. Their foam-dependent blocking strategy is easily penetrated by the smaller gloves, and their sprinters' conditioning completely gasses out as the legend leans on them and drags them into the late rounds. Ultimately, athletes haven't suddenly evolved into a superior species. Human nature, grit, and physical capability remain largely the same. What actually mutated is the regulatory ecosystem surrounding the sport. Instead of arguing over who would win a fictional time machine fight, we should simply appreciate that both champions perfectly mastered the unique, brutal crucibles of their own eras.